The night was cold on the ruins of the forgotten colony. The wind moved through the broken metal walls, making a soft, hollow sound like a dying song. The ground was covered in dust, the color of ash and old bones. In one corner, under a half-collapsed roof, two alien girls sat close together, trying to stay warm. The younger one, maybe 8 years old, was crying quietly. Her hands trembled as she held an empty food box made from thin steel. Her stomach growled, and every sound made her flinch. She wiped her tears with her dirty fingers, leaving gray marks on her pale blue cheeks. Her older sister, Lyra, watched her in silence. She looked strong, but her body was weak too. She hadn't eaten in 2 days, yet she pretended she wasn't hungry. Her silver hair was tangled and dirty, her glowing eyes dim with exhaustion. Still, she stayed calm for her sister's sake. "Don't cry, Mira," Lyra whispered. Her voice was soft but cracked with dryness. "I'll find something. I promise." Mira sniffled and tried to smile, but her lips shook. "You said that yesterday," she whispered. "There's no food left, Lyra. Everyone left us." Lyra looked away. She didn't want her sister to see the truth in her eyes. The colony had fallen months ago. The humans had taken control after the war. The alien families were scattered, most of them enslaved or sold. She and Mira had escaped, but freedom had no meaning when one was starving. A metallic hum echoed through the night. Lyra's eyes lifted toward the sound. Over the far ridge, a light appeared, a ship's landing beacon. Her heart jumped. No one came here anymore. The area was marked uninhabitable. The ship landed not far away, kicking up dust and light. A human figure stepped out. He wore a brown coat, and a small cargo drone floated behind him, carrying supplies. Lyra froze. She had seen humans before, men who treated her kind as property. Some offered food, but always with a price. She pulled her sister closer. "Stay here," she whispered. "Don't move." Mira's small hands clutched her sleeve. "No, Lyra. What if he's bad?" Lyra smiled faintly, though fear filled her chest. "All humans are dangerous," she said quietly. "But sometimes danger brings food." She stood up, her legs weak, and stepped out into the open. The man turned at the sound of her footsteps. His face was young but tired, marked by the kind of sadness that lives deep in the eyes. He didn't reach for a weapon. Instead, he looked surprised to see her. "What are you doing here?" he asked, his voice calm, human words slightly mechanical through his translator device. Lyra bowed her head. "Please, human. My sister is hungry. She hasn't eaten in days." The man's eyes softened. He looked past her and saw the small girl crouching behind the metal sheets. He knelt down and opened a small food crate from his drone. Inside were energy bars and sealed packs of nutrient paste. He held one out. "Take it." Lyra stepped forward slowly, suspicious. What do you want in return?" He blinked. "Nothing. She's a child." His words made her heart ache. Nothing. No one ever said that. No human ever gave something for free. She took the pack, ran to her sister, and handed it over. Mira tore it open and ate hungrily, tears of relief mixing with the dust on her face. Lyra watched her for a long moment. Then she turned back to the man. Her voice shook as she spoke. "I have nothing to pay you with, no money, no trade, but—" She took a deep breath, forcing the words out. "I can stay. I can work. I can serve you. Just keep feeding her." The man stood up, frowning. "No," he said simply. "I'm not that kind of man." But Lyra didn't believe him. She stepped closer, her voice low, desperate. "Please, you don't understand. If you leave, she'll die. If I stay with you, she lives." The man sighed. "What's your name?" "Lyra," she whispered. He looked at her sister again. "And her?" "Mira," he nodded slowly. "My name's Evan. I run a small post near the ridge. You both can come. There's food. A roof." Lyra hesitated. It sounded too easy. Humans always said kind words before taking everything. But Mira looked at her with hopeful eyes. "Please, Lyra," she said softly. "I don't want to die." Lyra's throat tightened. She looked back at the man. "If I come with you, you'll feed her?" "Yes," Evan said. "I'll feed you both." She lowered her head. "Then I'm yours." Evan frowned, confused. "No, you're not." But she was already kneeling before him, her head bowed. In her culture, it meant surrender. In her heart, it meant sacrifice. Behind her, Mira's small voice broke the silence. "Lyra, what are you doing?" Lyra didn't answer. She only whispered to herself, "It's okay, little one. You'll eat tonight." The man stood still, unsure what to say. The wind blew around them, carrying the cold scent of dust and metal. He finally said, "Get up. You don't need to bow, come on. Let's get you both somewhere warm." But Lyra didn't move. In her mind, the choice was already made. She had traded herself for her sister's life. As the three of them walked toward the ship, Mira clinging to Lyra's hand, the stars above flickered faintly, like watching eyes. None of them knew that this night, born of hunger and fear, would become the start of something that would change two worlds forever. The cargo ship's engine hummed softly as it cut through the dry wind of the wasteland. Inside, the small cabin was warm and dimly lit. The air smelled faintly of oil and metal. But to the two alien sisters, it felt like heaven. Mira sat near the heating vent, clutching a half-eaten food bar, her eyes wide with silent wonder. For the first time in weeks, her stomach didn't ache. She smiled shyly as the human Evan handed her a bottle of water. "Drink slowly," he said gently. "Your stomach's not used to real food yet." Mira nodded and obeyed. Her little hands were shaking, not from fear this time, but from relief. Lyra sat apart, quiet and tense. She didn't touch the food in front of her. Her glowing blue eyes followed every movement Evan made. She didn't trust him, not yet. She'd seen too much cruelty to believe in kindness, Evan noticed. He sat down across from her, not too close, but close enough to speak softly. "You're safe here. I'm not going to hurt you." Lyra's voice was low and cautious. Humans always say that before they take what they want. He looked down at his hands. "You're not wrong. But I'm not one of those humans." Lyra didn't answer. She kept her gaze on the floor. The warmth of the ship made her body relax, but her heart stayed guarded. When the ship landed, the door opened to reveal a small outpost surrounded by old shipping containers and tall antennas. There were solar panels, water tanks, and a greenhouse dome glowing softly in the dark. Evan helped Mira down the ramp, then offered his hand to Lyra. She ignored it and jumped down herself. He didn't mind. "Welcome to Ridgepoint Post," he said with a faint smile. "It's not much, but it's home." Mira's eyes lit up. "Home?" she whispered. Lyra's chest ached at the word. Home was something they hadn't had since the war. Evan led them inside a small building. It was filled with shelves of supplies, food packs, parts, tools. He guided them to a small corner with 2 clean beds and a heater. "You can rest here," he said. "No charge." "No trade," Lyra frowned. "Why?" He looked at her calmly. "Because you need it." She studied him for a long time. "Humans don't give without reason." "Tell me the price, Evan." He sighed, rubbing his neck. "There isn't one, just help me keep the place clean. Maybe tend the greenhouse. That's all." Lyra's expression didn't change, but her heart twisted in confusion. This man didn't fit the stories. He wasn't cruel, greedy, or cold. He spoke to her like an equal. But deep inside, she didn't believe it would last. That night, after Mira had fallen asleep, Lyra stood by the window, looking out at the stars. The broken moon hung above the wasteland, pale and distant. Evan was sitting by the power core, repairing an old drone. The orange light from his lamp reflected off his tired face. "Why did you help us?" she asked suddenly. He looked up, surprised by her voice. "Because I couldn't walk away." "You could have," she said. "Everyone else did." He smiled sadly. "Maybe I'm not like everyone else." Lyra crossed her arms. "You say that, but I know what humans think of my kind. I've seen your soldiers burn villages. I've seen your buyers trade lives like metal parts." He put down the tool and met her eyes. "And I've seen humans die protecting aliens. I've seen kindness from both sides. Don't judge everyone by the monsters." His tone wasn't angry. It was soft, tired, honest. Lyra didn't know how to answer. After a moment, she whispered, "If you don't want payment, then I'll still serve you. Not as a slave, but as a worker. I'll earn our food." Evan shook his head. "You don't have to earn kindness, Lyra." Her eyes darkened. "In my world, everything has a price." He didn't argue anymore. He just said, "Then let this be mine." Days passed. Mira grew stronger. She began helping Evan in the greenhouse, laughing as she watered small green plants under the artificial sun. Lyra cleaned the tools, fixed the pipes, and carried heavy boxes without being asked. She worked hard, always silent, always watching. At night, she sat awake, listening to the quiet hum of the machines and her sister's soft breathing. Part of her wanted to believe in this peace. The other part warned her it wouldn't last. Then, one evening, a group of travelers stopped by the post. 3 humans and 1 alien trader. They looked rough and tired, their clothes dusty from the wasteland. Evan offered them food and water just as he had to the sisters. But when the men saw Lyra and Mira, their eyes changed. One of them smirked. "Didn't know you were keeping pets, Evan." Lyra froze. Evan's jaw tightened. "They're guests," he said coldly. The man laughed. "Guests? Looks like good money walking on 2 legs." Evan stood between them and the sisters. His voice turned hard. "You'll leave them alone now." The trader raised his hands. "Easy, friend. Just talking." "Stop talking," Evan said. The men left after a few minutes, but Lyra saw it, the look in their eyes. They would come back. That night she went to Evan's room. "You shouldn't have defended us," she said quietly. He frowned. "Of course I should. You don't understand," she whispered. "Now they'll hunt you too." He smiled tiredly. "Then I guess we'll stand together." She looked at him for a long moment. For the first time, she didn't see him as a human stranger. She saw him as something rarer, someone who cared. As she left, his words echoed in her mind. "You don't have to earn kindness." She didn't believe them yet. But maybe she wanted to. Morning sunlight filtered through the thin glass of the greenhouse dome. The air was warm and smelled faintly of wet soil, something rare and precious on this barren world. Mira knelt beside a row of small green plants, her soft blue fingers brushing the leaves like they were jewels. "They're growing," she said with joy, her voice bright and full of life. Evan smiled from behind a workbench where he was repairing a cracked water pipe. "You're a natural," he said. Mira giggled. "It's because they're like me, small and hungry." Her laughter filled the greenhouse like music. It had been weeks since Evan had first found them. And the little alien girl now looked healthy, her cheeks fuller, her eyes glowing softly again. But while Mira healed, her sister did not. Lyra stood outside the greenhouse watching from the doorway. The light reflected off her pale skin, but she stayed in the shadows. Her arms were crossed and her expression unreadable. She saw how easily Mira laughed with the human, how Evan spoke gently to her like a father would to a child. It should have made Lyra happy, and part of her was, but another part twisted painfully inside. She sold herself for food, she reminded herself. She offered herself like property, and yet Evan had never treated her that way. He gave them food, shelter, and safety. He never touched her, never demanded anything. That made the guilt worse. She worked harder than before. When Evan tried to stop her from carrying heavy crates, she ignored him. When he told her to rest, she cleaned the generator instead. Every night she collapsed on her bed exhausted, trying to repay a debt he never asked for. One evening, as the sun set behind the dunes, Mira ran to her sister holding a flower from the greenhouse. Its petals were soft and golden. "Look, Lyra," Evan said, "it's called a sunbloom. He said it means life after storms." Lyra smiled faintly. "It's beautiful." Mira tucked the flower into her sister's hair. "He said you're the storm and I'm the bloom." Lyra froze. "He said that?" The child nodded proudly. "He said you protect me, but you don't let yourself be happy." That night, Lyra couldn't sleep. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, hearing Mira's steady breathing beside her. Evan's words echoed in her mind. "You don't let yourself be happy." Was that true? She had forgotten what happiness even felt like. The war had taken everything, her parents, her home, her safety. Survival was all she knew. And now, even when safety was offered freely, she didn't know how to accept it. Days passed quietly. Lyra began to understand Evan's routines, how he maintained the solar panels, how he kept track of water levels, how he traded with passing ships. He was different from the other humans. He lived alone, far from cities and power. His kindness wasn't loud. It was quiet, steady, patient. Sometimes she caught him watching Mira draw pictures on old cardboard scraps. The smile on his face was soft but distant, like it came from another life. Once, when Mira was asleep, Lyra asked, "You had a child once, didn't you?" Evan looked up from his desk, startled. "Yes," he said quietly. "A daughter. What happened?" He paused. "A war happened. The same one that hurt your people." Lyra's throat tightened. "I'm sorry," he shook his head. "You don't need to be. She's gone now. But helping you two, it feels like I can do something right again." For the first time, Lyra saw the pain behind his calm eyes. It wasn't pity. It was loss. the same kind she carried inside her. Something shifted in her heart that night. The peace didn't last long. 3 days later, the same travelers who had mocked them returned. Their ship landed near the ridge, and the sound made Mira drop her tools in fright. Lyra stepped outside, eyes sharp. Evan followed her, his hand near his pistol. The men looked rougher now, angrier. "Evan," their leader said, grinning, "heard you're keeping alien girls here. That's against the trade code." "They're under my protection," Evan said firmly. "Leave," the man smirked. "Protection? Sounds more like possession to me. You can't hide them forever." He glanced at Lyra, his gaze crawling like poison. "The older one's worth plenty in the markets. Pretty too." Before Evan could react, Lyra moved. She stepped between him and the raiders, her voice steady but cold. "If you touch him, I'll kill you." The man laughed. "You think you can fight us, little alien?" She didn't answer. Her glowing eyes burned brighter, her stance strong and silent. Evan placed a hand on her shoulder. "Inside, now." She hesitated but obeyed. The confrontation ended after a few tense minutes. The raiders left, but the warning hung heavy in the air. That night, Lyra cleaned the weapon rack in silence. "You shouldn't have stood in front of me," Evan said quietly. She looked at him. "You shouldn't have stood in front of me either." He smiled weakly. "Guess we're both bad at letting the other get hurt." Lyra looked down at her hands. "They'll come again. And this time." "They won't just talk," Evan nodded slowly. "Then we'll be ready." She looked up. "We?" He met her gaze. "I told you. You're not my servant, Lyra. You're part of this home now." For a long moment she said nothing. Then, for the first time since the war began, she smiled. Small, fragile, but real. That night, as the wind howled outside and the stars shimmered above the wasteland, Lyra lay awake again. But this time the guilt in her chest felt lighter. Maybe she hadn't sold herself after all. Maybe she'd been bought by something better than survival. By kindness. By trust. By the smallest spark of humanity that still lived in both of them. And in that quiet moment, under the weak hum of the heater, she whispered to herself, "Maybe storms can bloom too." The desert sky turned red that evening, the kind of red that warned of storms or death. The wind carried dust from the wasteland, scraping against the metal walls of the outpost like claws. Inside the small base, the lights flickered. Evan checked the perimeter monitors, frowning at the static. "Something's wrong with the signal," he muttered. Lyra, cleaning a broken rifle, looked up. "Raiders?" He hesitated. Could be, or just the storm. But both of them knew storms didn't jam sensors. Mira sat near the heater, drawing pictures on old boxes, a small human, 2 aliens, and a tiny green plant under a shining sun. "Look," she said proudly. "It's us." Evan forced a smile. "That's beautiful, Mira." Lyra's eyes softened for a second, then hardened again as she looked at the radar. She felt something cold in her chest. That old instinct from the war. Danger was close. Outside, a shadow moved between the dunes. Then another. Then many Evan's eyes narrowed. "They're here." The first explosion hit the outer fence, shaking the ground. The greenhouse glass shattered instantly, scattering bright shards like falling stars. Mira screamed and ran toward her sister. Lyra grabbed her, pushing her behind a wall. "Stay low." Evan rushed to the weapon rack, pulling down 2 rifles. "Take this," he shouted, tossing one to Lyra. She caught it easily, the movement smooth, practiced. Evan paused for a heartbeat. She wasn't just a survivor. She'd fought before. The door burst open. Armed raiders poured in, shouting, "Where's the alien girl?" Evan fired first, hitting one in the shoulder. Another man fired back, bullets sparking off the metal walls. The sound filled the room. Thunder, smoke, chaos. Lyra moved fast, rolling behind cover and firing with precision. Each shot was calm, controlled. Her eyes glowed bright blue, focused like a hunter's. But there were too many. The raiders were surrounding them, cutting off escape. Mira clung to her sister's leg, crying. "Lyra, I'm scared." Lyra's heart broke. "Don't be," she whispered. "I'll protect you." She turned to Evan. "Get her to the cellar." He hesitated. "What about you?" "I'll hold them off." Evan looked at her, at the fierce alien girl who once begged him for food, and saw something human in her courage. He didn't argue. He grabbed Mira and ran toward the back room. Lyra stepped out of cover, firing at the raiders. The sound of her weapon echoed through the outpost. 2 men fell, but one managed to throw a grenade inside. She saw it rolling across the floor. Without thinking, she ran forward, kicked it toward the door, and dove behind a crate. The blast shook the walls, filling the air with smoke and light. When the dust settled, she coughed hard, blood on her lips, but she was still standing. Then she heard a scream. "Lyra!" Evan's voice from the cellar. She ran toward it, limping slightly. The back corridor was burning. One of the raiders had broken through and was dragging Mira by the arm. "Let her go," Lyra shouted, raising her gun. The man laughed. "She'll fetch a high price." He didn't see Evan coming from behind him, silent, furious, eyes burning with rage. The human grabbed a metal pipe and struck the raider across the head. The man collapsed instantly. Evan dropped the pipe and fell to his knees, breathing heavily. Blood ran down his arm. He'd been shot. Lyra rushed to him, dropping her weapon. "You're hurt," he winced. "I've been worse," Mira cried, hugging him tightly. "Don't die, Evan, please." He smiled faintly, even as his face turned pale. "Not today, kid." The rest of the raiders retreated when they realized their leader was dead. The silence that followed was heavy and cold. Lyra helped Evan sit against the wall. She tore a piece of her sleeve and pressed it to his wound. "You're bleeding too much," she said, panic breaking through her voice. Evan tried to speak, but she cut him off. "Why did you do that? Why protect us? You could have let them take us." He looked at her, his voice weak but calm. "Because you're not things to take. You're people, Lyra." Her throat tightened. "I don't understand humans like you." He smiled faintly. "Then maybe I'm not like most." She stared at him, trembling. The man she once thought would buy her had just risked his life for her and her sister. Something deep inside her broke. Not from pain, but from realization. She knelt beside him and whispered, "I sold myself to save my sister. But you saved us without asking anything." He closed his eyes, tired. "That's what people should do." She pressed her hand to his, her glowing eyes filled with tears. "You're more alien than I am," he chuckled weakly. "I'll take that as a compliment." By dawn, the fire had died down. The outpost was damaged, but still standing. Evan was resting, wrapped in blankets. Lyra sat nearby, watching over him while Mira slept on her lap. Outside, the first rays of sunlight touched the ruins of the greenhouse. Amid the broken glass, one small green stem stood upright. The sunbloom had survived. Lyra looked at it through the cracked window and whispered softly, "You fight like him." For the first time, she didn't feel owned or helpless. She felt proud, not just of surviving, but of protecting, of belonging. The truth was clear now. The human who gave her food didn't buy her. He freed her, and in that moment she understood what humanity really meant. Not species, not skin, but the will to care, even when it hurts. The days after the attack were heavy with silence. The outpost still stood, but it no longer felt safe. The greenhouse was broken, the walls were scarred with burns, and the smell of smoke lingered in the air. Evan's wound healed slowly. Lyra watched over him day and night, barely sleeping. Each time he winced in pain, she felt something twist inside her, a feeling she didn't have a name for. Mira, cheerful as always, tried to keep their spirits up. She painted little suns on the metal walls with scraps of yellow dust. "See, it's pretty again," she said proudly. Lyra smiled faintly, though her eyes were tired. "You're our light, little one." Evan was sitting nearby, his arm still in a sling. "She reminds me of my daughter," he said softly. Lyra turned toward him. "Your daughter?" He nodded slowly. Her name was May. She was about Mira's age when the war started. The air grew still. Lyra didn't speak. She could feel the weight in his voice. Evan leaned back, staring at the broken ceiling. "When the fighting began, I worked with the Relief Corps, bringing food to alien camps. Most humans didn't want to help, but I couldn't stand watching children starve." He paused, his eyes distant. "One night, a raid hit our convoy. I lost everyone, my men, my ship, and May." Lyra's chest tightened. "She died?" His voice trembled slightly. "I don't know. They said she was taken. Maybe by slavers. Maybe worse. I searched every colony, every report, but I never found her again." He looked down at his hands, and scarred, weathered, tired. "After that, I left the army. I came here. I thought if I couldn't save her, I'd at least save someone else." Lyra felt something wet touch her cheek. She didn't realize she was crying until Evan looked up and smiled faintly. "Don't cry for me, Lyra," he said. "I made my peace a long time ago." She shook her head. "No, you didn't. You just learned to hide the pain." For a moment, neither spoke. The wind outside carried the sound of shifting sand and distant thunder. Then Evan looked at her, really looked at her, and said softly, "You remind me of her too." Lyra blinked. "Of your daughter?" He nodded. "The way you protect your sister. The way you fight the world even when it's cruel. May was like that. Always brave. Always ready to stand between me and danger even when she was small." Lyra's throat tightened. "You're saying that to comfort me?" "No," he said. "I'm saying it because it's true." That night, Lyra couldn't sleep. She sat outside the outpost, staring at the stars. The desert stretched endlessly, silver under the twin moons. She thought about his words, about the war, about how much both of them had lost. Mira slept peacefully inside, holding one of Evan's old jackets like a blanket. Lyra whispered to the wind, "Why did he have to lose so much just to help us?" The wind didn't answer, but the stars above seemed to shimmer a little brighter. The next day, a patrol ship appeared in the sky, white and marked with the crest of the Trade Authority. Lyra and Evan stood side by side, watching it land. "Don't speak unless I tell you," Evan said quietly. "They'll pretend to be polite, but they're looking for trouble." The officers stepped out, clean uniforms and cold smiles. "Evan Rhodes," the leader said. "We received a report of illegal alien harboring." Evan's voice stayed calm. "They're refugees. I gave them shelter." The officer's gaze shifted to Lyra. "Refugees? Or property?" Lyra's fist tightened. "I'm no one's property." The man smirked. "Then you won't mind coming with us to verify your identity." Evan stepped forward, blocking their path. "You're not taking them anywhere." The officer's expression hardened. "You're protecting alien fugitives." "That's a violation." "Then call it that," Evan said. "But I'm not letting you touch them." The officer leaned closer, his tone cold. "You think your kindness will change what they are?" Evan's eyes blazed. "You're right. It won't change what they are. But maybe it'll change what we are." The man hesitated. Something in Evan's voice stirred the conviction the fire made him step back. "Fine," he said finally. "But you've made enemies today, Rhodes." The patrol left without another word. The sound of their engines faded into the distance. Lyra exhaled shakily. "You risked everything again," she whispered. Evan shrugged. "It's not risk if it's the right thing to do." She looked at him, this broken human who kept standing between her and the world. And for the first time, she didn't see him as a savior. She saw him as someone who carried wounds just like hers, yet still found the strength to heal others. That evening, as the sky turned gold, Lyra helped him rebuild the greenhouse. They worked in silence, side by side, hands covered in dust. When the new sunbloom sprouted again from the soil, Lyra smiled. "You were right," she said softly. "It does mean life after storms." Evan looked at her with tired eyes and said, "Storms always end, Lyra. It's what comes after that matters." She nodded slowly, her gaze on the flower. "Then maybe it's time I stop living like I'm waiting for one." For the first time, she allowed herself to breathe, truly breathe, but without fear. In that moment, she understood what she and her sister had found wasn't just safety. It was something rarer. A home built not from walls or supplies, but from shared pain, from trust, and from the simple, fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, compassion could survive even in a broken world. Morning came slowly to the desert world. The sun rose like a glowing ember, spreading light over the broken outpost. The air smelled of dust and metal, but also of something new. Life. Inside the greenhouse, small green leaves trembled under the soft artificial lamps. Mira was humming as she poured water into the soil. Her voice was bright, pure, and full of innocence. Evan stood by the door, his arm still healing, watching her with quiet pride. "You've got a gift, kid," he said. "Those plants wouldn't last a day without you." Mira grinned. "That's because I talk to them. I tell them stories about you and Lyra." He smiled faintly. "Stories, huh? Hope you tell the good parts." From across the room, Lyra laughed softly, a sound Evan rarely heard before. "She only remembers the good parts," she said. "Children are like that. They hold on to light." Evan turned toward her. "And what about you? What do you hold on to?" Lyra hesitated. The question hit deeper than she expected. For a long time, she'd held on to pain, fear, and guilt. But now when she looked at him and her sister, something inside her was changing. "I think," she said slowly, "I'm starting to hold on to hope." Days passed in a rhythm that felt almost normal. They fixed what the attack had broken. Lyra repaired the power lines. Evan rebuilt the fence. Mira painted bright stars on the door. But peace never lasted long in the colonies. One evening, Evan received a transmission from a nearby human settlement. The screen flickered with the face of an official. "Evan Rhodes," the voice said sharply, "we've reviewed your file. You are sheltering unregistered aliens. If you continue, you'll lose your license and your outpost." Evan's jaw tightened. "They're under my protection." "That protection violates human law," the voice replied. "If you want to keep your base, surrender them." The signal ended before he could reply. Silence filled the room. Mira looked confused. "What does that mean?" Evan turned off the screen. "It means we have a choice to make." Lyra crossed her arms. "There is no choice." "We leave." He looked at her. "You don't have to. I can find a way to make them see reason." She shook her head firmly. "You'll lose everything because of us." Evan smiled faintly. "Everything I have is already here." Lyra stared at him speechless. He said it so simply, like it was truth, not kindness. She looked away, trying to hide the emotion in her eyes. "You're a fool, Evan Rhodes." "Probably," he said with a small grin. "But I'm a fool who believes people can be better." That night Lyra sat outside, the wind brushing her silver hair. She watched the stars, thousands of them, shining like tiny promises across the sky. Evan stepped out quietly, carrying 2 metal cups of tea. He sat beside her, the sand crunching under his boots. "You thinking about leaving?" he asked. "Yes," she said honestly. "If we go, you'll be safe. You'll keep your post, your home." He sipped his tea. "This place isn't home because of the walls, Lyra. It's home because of who's inside it." She glanced at him. His words were simple, but they hit deep. "I don't belong here," she whispered. "Your people will never see me as equal." "Maybe not," he said. "But I do, and that's enough for me." She turned to him, searching his face. "Why? Why risk your life for 2 aliens you barely know?" He met her gaze, his eyes warm and tired. "Because once someone risked everything for me. And I never got to thank her." Lyra frowned softly. "Your daughter?" He nodded. "When the raid came, she pushed me into a bunker. I wanted to go back for her, but the door sealed. She saved me, Lyra. A child saved her father. And now when I look at you and Mira, I see a chance to repay that debt. Not with money or power, but with kindness." Lyra's eyes filled with tears. She looked down, her hands trembling. "You make it sound so easy." He smiled gently. "It's not easy. It's just right." The next morning, Lyra made her choice. When Evan woke up, she was already outside, loading supplies into a transport crate. Mira stood beside her, crying. "Lyra, no." Mira sobbed. "I don't want to go." Lyra knelt down, holding her sister tightly. "Listen to me, little one. If we stay, they'll take him away. I won't let that happen." Evan came running, confusion and fear in his eyes. "Lyra, what are you doing?" She looked at him, her voice steady but full of emotion. "You gave us food. You gave us shelter. You gave us a reason to live. Now it's our turn to protect you." He shook his head. "No, Lyra, I won't let you go," she smiled sadly. "You can't stop me. You taught me that doing the right thing isn't always about staying. Sometimes it's about walking away." Evan stood there speechless. Mira clung to him, crying harder. "We'll come back." "I promise." Lyra looked at him one last time. "You saved us from hunger. You gave us hope. Don't lose yours." Then she turned and walked toward the horizon, her sister beside her, the morning light wrapping around them like fire and gold. Evan stood there, watching until they disappeared into the dunes. The outpost felt empty again, but this time the silence wasn't grief. It was pride. He whispered to the wind, "Take care of them, May. Keep them safe." And far away, beneath the same sky, Lyra looked up at the stars and whispered, "Thank you, human." A year passed. The twin suns rose and fell over the desert, carving new dunes and erasing old paths. The wind still sang through the wreckage of the colonies, carrying whispers of stories long forgotten. But somewhere beyond those sands, a new story had begun. Lyra and Mira had traveled far, past the scorched zones, through the trading cities, across borders that divided species but not hearts. They found work among the frontier settlements, helping other refugees build homes. Lyra's skill with machines made her valuable. Mira's laughter made her loved. They built shelters from scrap, repaired old generators, taught alien children to plant food again. But no matter where they went, one image stayed with them. A lonely human man standing beneath the rising sun, watching them walk away. Every time Lyra saw a new dawn, she thought of him. Every time Mira planted a seed, she whispered his name, Evan. Then one day, news spread across the colonies. A dust storm had destroyed a major trade route near Ridgepoint Outpost, the same outpost where they once lived. Lyra froze when she heard it. Her hands trembled as she read the transmission. Massive damage. No survivors confirmed. Mira's eyes filled with tears. Lyra, we have to go. The decision was instant. They packed what little they had and began the journey back, through dust, heat, and silence. For days they walked across the wasteland that once nearly killed them. When they finally reached Ridgepoint, the sight broke their hearts. The walls were half buried in sand. The antennas were twisted and torn. The greenhouse and the place where Mira once sang to her plants was gone. Lyra called out into the wind. Evan, Evan! No answer, only the howl of the storm. Mira began to cry, falling to her knees. He's gone. He's really gone. But Lyra didn't give up. She searched the ruins, her hands raw and bleeding from digging through the debris. Hours passed. The suns began to set, turning the sky orange and red. Then, under a piece of metal plating, she found a faint glow. A working data pad. She turned it on. A video file blinked on the cracked screen. The recording began. Evan's face appeared, older, weaker, but smiling. Lyra. Mira, he said softly. If you're seeing this, I guess I didn't make it through the last storm. Lyra covered her mouth, tears falling silently. I always knew you two would find your way back, he continued. Because you're stronger than anyone I've ever met. Stronger than most humans, too. He coughed, wiping sweat from his forehead. You once told me I gave you hope. But the truth is you gave me mine. You reminded me what being human means. Not blood, not species, but compassion. The screen flickered. If you're still alive out there, don't waste that light. Build something better. For both our kinds. The recording ended. Lyra stood frozen, the desert wind whipping her hair. Then she knelt, placed her hand over the cold metal and whispered, You didn't die, Evan, you became something more. Mira hugged her tightly. He's still here. I can feel him. Months later, a new settlement rose from the ruins. Not human, not alien, something different. Under Lyra's guidance, humans and aliens built side by side. They planted new crops in the same soil where the old greenhouse had once stood. The settlement grew quickly, attracting wanderers and refugees from across the systems. They called it Haven's Light. In the center stood a statue, not of a warrior, but of a man holding a small flower. The inscription read, He fed the hungry and freed the broken. He was human. Every morning, Lyra stood before it, remembering the man who gave everything without asking for anything. She still worked with her hands, fixing machines, teaching others how to build. But her voice carried strength now, a quiet authority born from pain and love. One evening, as the suns dipped below the horizon, Mira ran to her, holding a glowing flower in her palms. Look, it's a sunbloom. It grew again. Lyra smiled, tears of joy filling her eyes. Then his promise is still alive. They planted it in front of the statue. When night fell, the flower glowed gently in the darkness, just like the lights from the new settlement. Years later, travelers would pass through Haven's Light and ask about its story. The people would tell them, once a starving alien child cried for food and her sister offered to sell herself to a human. But the human refused to buy her. He gave her freedom instead. Together they built something that changed the stars. And so the legend spread, not of war or power, but of kindness. A simple human act that rippled across galaxies. Because sometimes, the strongest weapon isn't a gun or a ship. It's a heart that refuses to stop caring. As the suns rose over the desert once more, Lyra stood on the ridge, looking at the growing city below. Mira ran up behind her, laughing. You think he can see us? Lyra smiled softly, her eyes on the horizon. He doesn't need to. He's part of everything now. The air, the light, the people. She closed her eyes and whispered, You showed us what it means to be human, Evan. And we'll carry that light, forever. The wind rose, warm and golden, swirling around her like an embrace, and for a moment, just a moment, she swore she heard his voice in the breeze, gentle and proud. Good job, kid.